Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that lingers in the quiet spaces between trust and grief, the kind of pain that doesn't shout, but instead slowly wraps around your chest and squeezes until you can't breathe. It begins with a woman named Sabrina, 30, who lives just outside Boise, Idaho. She had been dating a man named Elliot, 34, for about 8 months, and in her words, Elliot was everything she didn't think she deserved. He was calm, kind, gentle, the type of man who could sense when your world was falling apart and would sit quietly beside you without trying to fix it, just hold the space so you didn't have to be alone in it. They didn't live together, but their relationship had been growing in a soft, promising direction. Sabrina said they rarely argued, and when concerns came up, Elliot always made her feel safe enough to voice them. It felt stable in a way her previous relationships never had. But all of that started to crack about a month ago when Sabrina got a message from her friend Chloe. It was a photo taken outside a small ice cream parlor in downtown Boise. The image showed Elliot sitting on a bench eating ice cream with a woman Sabrina didn't recognize. The thing is, Elliot had told her he'd be at work that day. Chloe happened to work in the same area and spotted him, so she took a discreet photo and sent it over with a simple message. Thought he said he was at the office? Sabrina had been cheated on before. Badly. And even though she'd done the work, even though she told herself this relationship was different, her stomach dropped. She felt that awful buzzing in her chest, the one that makes your thoughts run wild. But she talked herself down, told herself it was probably a coworker or a cousin. Maybe he just didn't want to explain the change in plans. She forced the image out of her head and moved on. Fast forward to a Friday. Sabrina had wrapped up her work-from-home day early and decided to surprise Elliot with lunch at his office. Something sweet, something simple. She imagined the look on his face when she walked in with his favorite sandwiches. But when she arrived, the receptionist gently told her that Elliot was out for a few days and wouldn't be back until Monday. She tried to keep calm, thanked the woman, and walked back to her car, her heart thudding louder with every step. Instead of going home, she drove straight to Elliot's house. He answered the door wearing sweatpants and a tired smile. He told her he hadn't been feeling great and decided to call out for a couple of days, completely forgetting to mention it. She tried to act like it was fine, even though something in her stomach had started to knot. They ordered takeout, curled up on the couch, and eventually drifted off to sleep. Around 3 a.m., Sabrina woke up needing to use the bathroom. On her way back, she saw Elliot's phone on the coffee table, its screen lighting up briefly. She hesitated. She knew his passcode, not intentionally, just from watching him type it in a few times, and before she could stop herself, she picked it up and opened it. Most of the messages looked normal, but two stood out. One was a group chat filled with names she didn't recognize. The other was a quiet, one-sided conversation with someone named Caleb. The group chat puzzled her. The people in it treated Elliot like family, talking about planning vacations together and sharing jokes and memories. But it wasn't his family. She'd met them before. One named Jessica mentioned how special their ice cream date had been last month. That's when it clicked. Jessica was probably the woman in the photo. The messages to Caleb were even more confusing. They were sparse. Just a few short bursts of "I love you" and "I miss you" scattered over months. Sabrina's chest tightened. Everything in her screamed that this was another betrayal, that she was just a placeholder. She didn't wait. She shook Elliot awake, tears already forming. She held up his phone and asked, no, demanded, "Who the hell is Caleb, and who are all these people?" What happened next shattered me. Elliot sat up, looked at the screen, and without a word, smashed the phone against the hardwood floor. Then, shaking, he pulled open a drawer, took out an old printed photo, and handed it to me. "This is Caleb," he said, his voice hollow. "My husband. He died by suicide 5 years ago." Elliot's voice was even, but I could see the fracture behind his eyes. He told me that Caleb's birthday had been last month. That's why he went out for ice cream with Jessica, Caleb's older sister. It was Caleb's favorite place in all of Boise, some tiny local shop tucked near the Riverwalk. Elliot and Jessica go there every year to honor him. They talk about Caleb, they laugh, they remember, and they cry sometimes when no one is looking. This week, the one I barged into was the hardest of all. It was the anniversary of Caleb's death. Elliot had taken time off work to visit his grave, something he did every year without fail. He didn't tell me because, as he admitted quietly, he didn't know how. It was too raw, too close. And in that moment, as I stood there stunned, with his shattered phone at our feet, all I could feel was shame. I had no idea Caleb had ever existed. I knew Elliot was bisexual. That had come up early, briefly, and without drama. But he'd never talked about a husband, never mentioned a loss like this, never hinted at the depth of pain he was still carrying. When he finished talking, he didn't yell, he didn't curse, he just looked at me and asked me, with devastating calm, if I could please leave, that he needed time, that he would reach out when he was ready, if he ever was. And then he turned away. I can't describe the feeling that washed over me as I walked back to my car. It was a thick, dragging kind of sorrow. Not just because I hurt him, but because I shattered something sacred. I accused the man I love of cheating on me with someone who wasn't even alive to defend himself. How do you come back from that? Later that night, I sat in bed replaying everything, trying to understand how I could have messed up so badly. So many people asked if I ever brought up past relationships with Elliot, and the truth is, no, I didn't. We met at a design conference. Both of us were exhausted, professionally burned out, and emotionally guarded. Neither of us were searching for love, and because of that, everything moved slowly. He was always private, that much was clear from the beginning. He never pushed me to share more than I was comfortable with, and I gave him the same in return. I respected his space. I figured that when the time was right, we'd naturally open up more. But I didn't think he had a whole chapter of his life wrapped around a person he still grieved. I didn't think the silence was covering something this deep, and maybe that was naive. I also know what I did. Going through his phone was a complete betrayal of his trust. There's no defense for it. None. I let old wounds steer the wheel, and in doing so, I inflicted a fresh one on someone who didn't deserve it. Since then, I've started looking for a therapist. I've realized that the fear and suspicion I carry, the paranoia left behind from people who once lied to me, is something I have to take responsibility for. Elliot didn't cause it, but he suffered for it. He hasn't reached out since asking me to leave, and I'm not going to chase him. If he wants to talk, I'll be here, but only when he's ready. When I posted my story online, I was flooded with responses, some supportive, others critical, all valid. One person wrote that if they'd been in my shoes, they would have simply asked their partner about the ice cream encounter instead of letting suspicion spiral into silence. That hit me hard, because I thought I was someone who could communicate, someone who felt safe in this relationship, and yet when discomfort came knocking, I recoiled inward. Another comment pointed out how strange it was that Elliot hadn't mentioned being married. I understand that too. 8 months isn't a lifetime, but it's long enough to share something this important. But he wasn't just keeping a secret. He was guarding a wound, and I was careless with it. I know now we were both wrong in different ways. I violated his privacy. He withheld a part of himself. We met in a fragile place, each of us still carrying the weight of old pain, trying to pretend we were whole. Maybe therapy can help me sort out the parts of me that still expect abandonment. Maybe it can help me become someone worthy of the kind of love I once believed I didn't deserve. If Elliot never contacts me again, I'll understand. But if he does, I hope I'll be someone better by then. Not just for him, but for myself. 2 days after everything fell apart, Elliot called. I had just gotten home from my first therapy session and sat staring at my untouched dinner when my phone lit up. His name on the screen made my heart stop. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready to hear his voice again, unsure if it would bring comfort or reopen wounds that hadn't begun to scab over. But I answered. He spoke softly, his tone even but worn. He said he was ready to talk. We stayed on the phone for almost 4 hours that night. It was awkward at first, the kind of silence that feels heavy with unsaid things, but eventually we both began to unravel the tangle we had created together. I told him how deeply I was sorry, not just for looking through his phone, but for not coming to him when I first felt unsure, for letting my own past wounds dictate how I treated him. I admitted I should have trusted him enough to talk. He listened, quietly. Then he told me something I wasn't expecting. He said he hadn't shared Caleb with me because deep down he was terrified that doing so would somehow mean letting go of him, that by saying Caleb's name out loud, by telling someone new about the man he lost, he'd be admitting that the life they built was truly over. He said he wasn't ready for that. And I understood, more than I ever thought I would. Grief is strange like that. It makes you hold on tighter to things that are already gone. He also told me that he knew hiding that part of himself was unfair, especially after 8 months, that it wasn't a conscious act of deception, just a survival mechanism, a way of protecting something fragile. He didn't expect me to stumble into that part of his world, and when I did, it sent him spiraling too. We talked about how we got here. 2 people, both a little broken, who weren't really looking for something serious, but somehow ended up caring too much, too fast. We agreed. We moved quickly. We skipped over the deeper conversations, the hard truths, thinking we could just coast on the good days. But grief and trauma don't stay buried. They always find a way to surface. After that call, we met in person. Elliot invited me over, and we sat on the same couch where everything had unraveled. It felt different now, quieter. He looked tired, and I probably did too. But we were both more honest that night than we had been in the entire time we had known each other. We talked for hours again, about what we wanted, about what scared us, and about what healing might look like if we tried to do it side by side. We didn't make promises. We didn't claim everything would go back to how it was, but we agreed to try, carefully and slowly. There was one thing he said that stayed with me more than anything else. We're both carrying things we never asked for. Maybe we can help each other put some of it down. And I think that's what love really is, or at least what it should be. Not fixing each other, not saving each other, but being there. Sitting with each other in the dark until the light feels safe again. So we're trying, whatever that means right now. We're not labeling it, we're just showing up. I've continued seeing my therapist. I've started journaling. I've reached out to friends I distanced myself from while I was wrapped up in the newness of this relationship. And Elliot has opened up more too. He told me stories about Caleb, about their wedding, about the first time they met, about the day he lost him. He cried, and I held his hand. We're still cautious, still bruised, but maybe that's okay. Maybe healing isn't about rushing to be whole again, but learning to live with the cracks in a way that lets the light in. When I wrote the original post, I didn't expect so many people to read it. I definitely didn't expect the comments. Some gentle, some blunt, some painfully true. But I'm grateful for them. The hard ones forced me to look in the mirror. The kind ones reminded me I'm not alone. And when I said we were both deeply broken people, that wasn't a metaphor. That was truth. But there's a strange sort of hope in that too, because broken people still feel. They still try. And sometimes they find each other in the rubble and decide it's worth building something new. So this is where we are now. Not fixed, not finished, but trying. And for the first time in a long time, that feels enough. I used to think the pain would always tie me down, that no matter how far I ran, I'd always feel the weight of home clinging to me. But for the first time, that grip has loosened. Leaving was never about revenge, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't wish, just a little, that the silence I left behind would echo louder than all the yelling I grew up with. I hope the burden of raising two boys who never learned how to lift a finger rests solely on my parents' shoulders now. I hope they feel the full weight of the mess they created and chose to ignore. I don't feel sorry for them. I don't think I ever will. What they did, what they allowed, shaped me into someone who had to become self-sufficient out of survival, not choice. And while I've made peace with the fact that I'm strong, I'll never forgive them for how I had to learn it. They don't know I got into college. Never asked. Never cared. I applied to George Mason University in Virginia completely on my own. I'll be studying finance this fall. It's ironic. Growing up in a house where no one taught me how to budget for groceries, I somehow found clarity in numbers. I like how they make sense when nothing else does. I also trained myself into the body they always wanted me to have. 6 sports a year, every season filled, every bruise, every sprain a small price to pay to be tough enough, as my father used to say. But no one ever taught me how to be soft, how to be heard, how to be loved. And that absence, that quiet hollowness, took my childhood with it. I never got it back. So I left. The 2 weeks after my post were a blur of planning and sleepless nights. I changed my number by calling my carrier from a friend's phone. Then I tracked down my birth certificate, not the real one, but a copy I could use. I had no idea where the original was, and I wasn't going to ask. Some things were better left untouched. I double-checked my bank account to make sure nothing was tied to my parents, closed old ones, opened new ones. It's strange how easy it is to disappear when you're determined enough. Then I booked a one-way flight to Virginia, just outside Fairfax, near my campus. I used gift cards I'd collected and cash tips from the part-time job I kept hidden all summer. Quiet victories, quiet freedom. The night I left, I waited until everyone in the house was asleep. My cousin Tyler, one of the few people who ever truly saw me, pulled up outside at 12:30 a.m. on the dot. I carried a single duffel bag, half clothes, half memories I didn't know if I even wanted to keep. Before I walked out, I left a note on the kitchen counter. I didn't pour my heart out. I didn't explain. I just wrote, "I've moved to California. Don't look for me. I'm never coming back." It was petty and deliberate. I didn't go to California, but I knew it would sting. Tyler drove me to the police station, where I checked in, gave my ID, and let them know I wasn't missing. I was leaving of my own free will. I had just turned 18. I was finally allowed to choose my own life. The officer was kind, asked if I needed anything. I said no. By 6 a.m., I was on a flight out of New Orleans. Now I'm sitting in my dorm. It's small, a little cold, but it's mine. It's 950 miles away from everything I used to know, and for the first time I can breathe. The kind of breath that doesn't feel stolen or heavy, just mine. I didn't expect the response my story got. Thousands of strangers read it. Some offered advice, others just said they were proud. And I realized sometimes we don't need people to fix our story. We just need someone to witness it. A few days later, Tyler called to say my mother showed up at his house, crying, saying she couldn't believe I had abandoned them, that she raised me, fed me, kept me alive. My aunt, who had seen more than she ever said, told her maybe if they hadn't treated me like I was disposable, I wouldn't have left. They argued. She left in tears. I don't know where she went after that. But I know where I am, and for the first time, I think I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. 4 months have passed since I left home, and I still sometimes wake up thinking I'll hear my father's footsteps outside my door or my mother yelling for me to take out the trash. It's strange how even freedom comes with echoes. But I'm still here, still standing, and I finally have something close to peace. Thanksgiving was the first holiday I spent in my hometown since I left. I didn't go back to my parents' house. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed with my aunt and uncle, just 4 blocks away. Their home has always felt different, warmer, like a place where I could breathe without being punished for it. My parents knew I was in town. I'm sure they did, but they didn't show up. They weren't welcome anyway. My aunt told them very clearly that if they wanted to see me, they'd have to acknowledge the years they tried to break me down. Apparently, they left without saying much. That silence, for once, was a gift. Christmas was similar. I sat at the dinner table surrounded by people who smiled without strings attached, people who asked how school was going and actually waited for the answer. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet I grew up with, the one that felt like a loaded gun on the table. This quiet felt earned. They still don't know where I live, or what I'm studying, or who I'm becoming, and honestly, I hope it stays that way. College has been better than I imagined. The classes are hard, but I like the challenge. I've made friends, real friends, people who don't expect me to carry their weight or prove my worth just to be allowed to exist, people who laugh with me, not at me. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm bracing for impact every time I walk into a room. I ended last semester with a 3.9 GPA. I didn't think I was capable of something like that. For so long, I believed the lies they told me, that I wasn't smart, that I wouldn't amount to anything unless I worked myself into the ground. But here I am, thriving, despite them. I picked up 2 part-time jobs at local restaurants. One has me washing dishes during the dinner rush, the other is salad prep on weekends. It's exhausting sometimes. Long hours, aching feet, the smell of vinegar and onions that never seems to wash out. But it's mine. I earn every cent. I pay my rent, I buy my own groceries. And I don't have to ask anyone for permission. That in itself feels like a kind of miracle. I never ended up going to therapy, even though I know a lot of people suggested it. I think part of me still struggles to open up in that way, to sit in a room and talk about feelings I've spent my whole life trying to bury. But I'm working on it. Maybe one day I'll go. For now, I journal, I run, I talk to friends, and sometimes, when the nights are especially quiet, I cry into my pillow, without shame. Because I've learned that strength isn't about pretending you're okay. Sometimes it's just about not giving up. When I shared my story months ago, I never expected so many strangers to care. The support, the messages, the encouragement, it meant more than I can say. In a world that once convinced me I was alone, this community helped me feel seen. So thank you. Truly. I don't know exactly what's next. Life still feels fragile, like one wrong move could unravel it all. But I've made it this far on nothing but grit and a suitcase of determination, and I'm not turning back. To anyone who's reading this and feels stuck, trapped, unwanted, I promise you, there's a life waiting for you on the other side. One where you don't have to earn love through exhaustion. One where you get to exist without fear. I didn't think I'd ever be able to say this, but I love my new life. And that, more than anything, is the kind of freedom I never thought I'd find. She didn't just slam the door once. She slammed it 5 times, one after another, like gunshots through the silence. I didn't yell, even though my chest burned with exhaustion. I just stood there, shaking, and said, "If you do that again, you'll come home and find the door gone." She shouted something cruel in return and vanished behind the door, slamming it one last time like it was meant to break the house apart. The next day was Friday. Elliot and I both had the day off, and the air between us was filled with the kind of tired resolve that settles in after too many sleepless nights. So we did it. We took the door off its hinges. We didn't just leave it bare. We installed a curtain rod and hung up a thick, dark blue curtain, the kind used in theaters, heavy enough to block out sound and light. We even added Velcro to the edges to make sure it stayed closed. It wasn't perfect, but it was a compromise. She still had privacy, but not something she could weaponize in the middle of the night. When she came home and saw it, she completely broke. She screamed that we were emotionally abusive, that we violated her rights, that we didn't understand her, didn't care. She locked herself in, or rather yanked the curtain shut with finality and refused to speak to either of us. Not that we hadn't tried. We knocked, we waited, we left food, nothing. My mother says I overreacted, that I was being dramatic. But she never had to wake up at 2 a.m. from the sound of a door rattling the foundation of her home. She never had to sit with her back against her child's door, whispering through tears and fabric, hoping for some kind of understanding. I want to be clear, we've always respected privacy in this house. We've never barged into her room, never read her texts, never crossed those lines. That curtain wasn't punishment. It was a plea for peace. We told her she'd get the door back as soon as she agreed to stop the slamming, that it was temporary, that all she had to do was talk to us, to meet us halfway. But days passed, then weeks, and the curtain remained. Online, people had opinions. Some said we were right, that boundaries are important and actions should have consequences. Others brought up fire safety, which I hadn't thought of but took seriously. Some said it was cruel, that we were turning our daughter's space into a prison. But I think what hurt the most was realizing how fragile everything had become, how small decisions can open up old wounds, how silence can become the loudest thing in the house. We're trying. We really are. We're not perfect parents, far from it, but we're people who've already walked through grief and guilt, and the last thing we want is to watch the person we love most build walls so thick she forgets we're on the other side. If I could go back, maybe I would have done it differently. Maybe I would have taken her out for coffee and asked what was really going on instead of reacting to the noise. Maybe I would have seen the slamming for what it really was, not defiance, but a cry for something we hadn't given her. But we're here now, in a house that doesn't shake at night, in a home where love is quiet and clumsy and still learning how to speak. And the curtain, it's still there. Stories like this, heavy with misunderstanding and broken communication, are more common than we admit. Sometimes it's not about right or wrong. It's about pain speaking louder than words and the people involved not knowing how to listen. If you find yourself in a toxic dynamic, whether it's with a parent, partner, child, or friend, the first step isn't control, it's curiosity. Ask what's behind the behavior. Is it fear, anger, grief? People act out when they don't feel safe, heard, or seen. Replacing judgment with empathy doesn't excuse the damage, but it opens a door to healing. Don't be afraid to set boundaries, but make sure they're rooted in care, not punishment. Don't wait for things to explode before you start a conversation. And most of all, remember that silence is rarely empty. It usually means something's breaking beneath the surface. You don't have to be perfect to repair what's been hurt. You just have to show up again and again with your heart open and your ears ready. That's where healing begins.